welcome to this week's edition of World Crisis Radio. This is Webster Tarpley reporting this week once again from home base here in Washington, D.C. Now, we're going to give you a report on the very important intervention of the Tax Wall Street Party into the Left Forum in New York City last weekend that left the forces of limited hangouts, the forces of the color revolution are reeling as a result of that powerful intervention. It basically saved the Left Forum from being taken over by a nefarious British front group. But we have to go first to the financial front. And this, of course, involves Greece. We're going to be getting, if all goes well, we'll be getting a report from Athens at the beginning of the second hour from our fine correspondent there, Michael Chiotinis. But we've got to talk about the general situation first. Pardon me. Are we dealing with Europe of the banks and cartels? Yes, indeed we are. The Europe of the Schäubles and the Draghis and the Hollandes. That's the Europe of the banks and the cartels, and they are bearing down on Greece. But this is not so simple. In the past 24 hours or so, Greece has announced that they will postpone a payment, and I think this is one going to the International Monetary Fund, of about 300 million euros that Greece was supposed to pay on January 5th. You remember last week we talked to Michael Chiotinis, and he pointed us to today, that is this Friday, the 5th of June, that this is when Greece is supposed to make a 300 million euro payment. The Greek government says, we have that money, we have that cash, we could pay you, but we're not going to pay you. This is, of course, an option, perfectly legitimate, built into the agreement. It's built into the agreement. It's not default. It's not breaking anything. It's simply a cash management option that the Greek government has, and it's written into the deal. But now what we're looking towards is the countdown to the 30th of June. The 30th of June. And I guess it's beware the kalends of July, the 1st of July. So watch out for what happens here at the end of June. So we're talking about the transition from the second quarter to the third quarter. That's now looming as the big one. Often it's September to October. Not this time. It's June to July. At that point, in theory, the Greek government is supposed to pay 1.3 billion euros. Will this happen? Well, it will only happen if these characters from the Troika, the institutions, the European Commission, the European Central Bank, and the ultra-nefarious International Monetary Fund of Madame Lagarde, they've all got to cough up money. And indeed, the way this European construct has been put together, this was not the most clever. It looks like most of the parliaments, at least of the Eurozone, and quite possibly even others, I don't know, will have to vote on whatever deal emerges. So you're really, with all of that rigmarole, you're looking at probably a 2 to 3 week window at the most, not really the 4-week window that this would suggest. So we're going to the brink. We're going to the brink. And make no mistake, this is the brink. Don't listen to that German propaganda, the siren song of Schäuble sitting in his wheelchair and telling us, well, don't worry. It won't be a world banking panic. It won't be a world breakdown crisis because we've taken the countermeasures. Baloney. Don't tell me about the capitalization of your banks. It's insignificant compared to the losses that can be generated with modern derivatives, the ones that you have invented and cultivated, dear Wall Street and City of London and Frankfurt financier oligarchs, the credit default swap in particular, the collateralized debt obligation, and all the rest of those derivatives. They will sweep away much of the existing architecture. Now, we're told in an interesting discussion on National Public Radio this morning that the United States is appealing to the European Union, that is to say to Monsieur Junckers. Monsieur Junckers has been told, please don't blow this up. And I guess Schäuble and Madame Merkel have been told, please don't blow this up. You're taking the entire system to the brink. So the U.S. message to the European Union, both in Brussels and to Draghi in Frankfurt, European Central Bank, and to Berlin, don't blow up the world because of your silly difference of opinion with Greece, right? It's not worth it, right? As another official might say, I don't care what you do with Greece, right? Avoid the breakdown crisis of the world. So let's see now what has happened even more recently. A couple of days ago here, May 31st, Alexis Tsipras' article in Le Monde, Europe at the Crossroads. Now, he goes through the failures of austerity. Why austerity is a disaster. 5 years of Troika, 5 years of memorandum. By memorandum, of course, they mean the letter of intent, the conditionalities that are imposed in order to get the IMF seal of approval, a seal of approval from a homicidal madman. But of course, that's the way the world works. The Greek people have paid a price. The unemployment rate over 5 years went to 28%, 60% for young people. Average income down by 40%. And it's the highest social equality in Europe. Public debt from 124% to 180% of GDP. Sacrifices. Trapped in continuous austerity, as the Financial Times guy on NPR said today. Greece is in a debtor's prison. Interestingly, what you see here, the Financial Times line is a haircut for the investors, a haircut for the bondholders is inevitable. Now, you can see what it is. The U.S. and the British are telling Europe, eat those losses, eat those losses. They're nothing compared to the losses you're going to have if Greece leaves and your entire system begins to crumble and fall apart. So we're going to the brink. I'm thinking of Nicholas Nickleby, I guess, is the Dickens novel about debtor's prison and related things. So back to the article by Tsipras here in Le Monde. He says it is not true that we have not made concessions, and he goes through a whole list of concessions. And of course, he points out that there are important things here, such as parts of Greek society that were flagrantly ignoring the tax laws, and the Troika didn't care, right? The Troika, of course, is the class-based organ of the financier oligarchy, right? The imperialist finance bourgeoisie, if we want to put it that way. So that's who the Troika is serving. But Tsipras says that, look, we're carving a lot of this back out of the oligarchs. We're forcing them to pay for television licenses. The political elite is going to be called to pay their fair share. There's tax fraud going on with triangular transactions, customs and tax controls to reduce smuggling and tax evasion. So all of these things, which actually, in theory, should be pleasing to the Troika, have not been enough, right? The Troika says that's not enough. We want to attack pensions. We want to attack the poorest and most defenseless. Back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. We have to fault the Canadian government mightily. A neo-McCarthyite regime in Canada. You can be a great creative artist like Madame Lissitsas, and you're going to be banned for your political opinions. Shame on Canada. All this hypocrisy that they were somehow freer and more able to provide liberty. Baloney. It's not happening. Look at that guy Harper. He's a neocon. Look at it's us. Canadians put an end to this neo-McCarthyism, right? Get that woman reinstated. She's a great artist. She does not deserve this. Just because she has a soft spot for Donetsk, as do we. And we're going to talk about this in just a minute, because Donetsk is now under unprecedented fascist attack. And we're going to turn to that in just a second. But now the big picture in the world is this financial situation. So, at any rate, in Le Monde on the 31st of May, Tsipras goes through a whole series of things that they've done, concessions that they've made. They've agreed to propose, to prolong, to delay, to temporize. Why the liquidity blockade on the Greek economy? Greece is trying to pay. They have paid more than 17 billion euros in interest and amortization. That's about 10% of GDP since August 2014 without any external funding. Now, what is the demand of the Troika? It seems to be, once again, looting pensions. They're not interested. You can put the screws on the fat cats and the oligarchs. No, that doesn't count. They want to see austerity against the helpless parts of society. Okay. The other thing is labor. They say, we want reforms. And indeed today on this national public radio, they're all prating about reforms. In oligarch speak, reform means you're stripping somebody of their rights. That's what's called reform. So the ability to fire somebody, hire and fire, that's a reform. No, that's not a reform. That's turning the clock back to the Dickensian world of hire and fire, which we have here in the United States. Nobody in his right mind should want this. So what they're saying is the position from Tsipras is the European institutions are demanding a degradation of the Greek labor market, which is below the standards which the European Commission and European Parliament have promulgated for the European labor market. In other words, they're demanding that the Greek government flagrantly violate European labor legislation. All right. And then pensions, we've heard about it. Almost half of all pensioners in Greece receive a pension which places them below the threshold of poverty. And 23% more live in danger of poverty and social exclusion. So, why is there a crisis, says Tsipras? It is due to the insistence of certain institutional actors, Schäuble, Draghi, Juncker, who insist on submitting absurd proposals and displaying a total indifference to the recent democratic choices of the Greek people, despite the fact that they'd said they would have to make some kind of concession. Is it careerism? Is it that somebody like Schäuble has been wrong so much that he can't admit it because that would be the end of him? No, it is a European strategy, he says, that essentially goes for a two-speed Europe. The core, the wealthy part, will set the tough rules regarding austerity with a super finance minister and the European Central Bank with unlimited dictatorial powers, harsh punishment, mandatory austerity, more restrictions on the movement of capital, and so forth. Now, the warning, here's the warning. What is not being taken into account here by these Eurogarchs and Eurocrats is the huge risk, the enormous danger involved in the two-speed Europe. The strategy risks the beginning of the end of the European unification project by shifting the Eurozone from a monetary union to an exchange rate zone. It triggers economic and political uncertainty, which is likely to transform the economic and political balances throughout the Western world. We are at a crossroads. We have made concessions. The decision is in the hands of the institutions, even though these are simply front men for the leaders of the various countries. And then finally, will it be Europe of solidarity, equality, and democracy, or rupture